Hey everyone and welcome. So, if you're an endurance swimmer, you've probably been told a million times to just take huge, deep breaths, to cram in more oxygen. But what if I told you that's completely wrong? Today, we're going to dive into some pretty counterintuitive science that could honestly change how you breathe in the water forever. So let's just get right to it. I've got to ask, are you breathing all wrong when you swim? For years, there's been this one piece of advice that's dominated every pool and coaching manual out there. But what if that advice isn't just, a little inefficient? What if it's actually holding you back?
Yeah, we've all heard it, right? The logic seems so simple. Swimming is tough, your muscles need oxygen, so the more air you can gasp in, the better you're going to perform. It feels right. But it turns out groundbreaking research is showing us that this piece of common wisdom, well, it's pretty much a myth.
And that brings us to what we are calling the great oxygen myth. Because all that frantic effort to stack oxygen isn't just a waste of your energy, it can be actively dangerous. It literally overrides your body's natural safety signals.
Okay, so here's the surprising twist. When you hyperventilate, taking all those quick, shallow breaths, you're not actually packing more usable oxygen into your blood. What you are doing is blowing off way too much carbon dioxide. And as it turns out, that CO2 is way, way more important than you might think.
So let's get into the science of it, because this is where it gets really fascinating. Why is that CO2 signal so crucial? Well, your body has this incredibly smart system for managing your breathing, and it's not based on what you'd expect at all.
We all feel it, that desperate, panicky urge to breathe, and we instinctively think it's from a lack of oxygen. But the reality, which has been confirmed over and over in physiology labs, is that the urge is actually triggered by a buildup of carbon dioxide. You have these special little sensors in your body called chemoreceptors that are constantly monitoring CO2 levels. When they get too high, they basically send a giant red alert to your brain that says, breathe now.
So what happens when you hyperventilate and artificially force your CO2 levels down? You're basically hitting the snooze button on that alarm system. Your body can be running on fumes, critically low on oxygen, but because your CO2 levels are so low, you never get that warning signal. And this can lead to something absolutely terrifying known as a hypoxic blackout.
And I want to be clear, this isn't some tiny risk. A major European review from 2023 found that swimmers who hyperventilate before getting in the water increase their risk of blacking out by a staggering 15 times. I mean, think about that. That's the difference between a safe swim and a life-threatening emergency.
Okay, so training your body to tolerate higher levels of CO2 isn't just a neat trick. It's the key to unlocking better and safer endurance. So let's look at the incredible research coming out of university sports labs that's proving it.
This stuff is so cool. Researchers all over the world are confirming this. So over at the University of Western Ontario in Canada, swimmers who just added simple breath hold intervals saw their endurance jump by up to 8%. Then in Poland, they had athletes use a special mask to simulate high CO2. And that led to a 10% improvement in their ventilatory threshold. And in Japan, they found that just controlling your breathing frequency led to a 3% improvement in time trials. The evidence is just undeniable. Training for CO2 tolerance works.
And get this might just be the secret sauce that separates the best from the rest. Research from Nagoya University found that elite swimmers and triathletes naturally have a 20 to 30% higher tolerance for CO2. That is not a coincidence. It's a real physiological advantage that is directly tied to their superior performance.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. Now for the good part, the how. How can you take all these powerful findings from the labs and actually apply them to your own training, right there in your own pool?
The Polish Academy of Physical Education put together this brilliant 6-week program that anyone can adapt. You start really simply, with short 25-meter swims just focusing on breath control. Then, you gradually start adding some resistance and extending the distance, and bit by bit, you're training your body to become way more efficient and comfortable with those higher CO2 levels. It's a super clear, step-by-step path to getting better.
And there are even more tools you can add to your toolbox. Research from top universities supports all these techniques. Things like bilateral breathing to balance out your stroke, using respiratory muscle trainers to make your diaphragm stronger, and mixing in different kinds of controlled frequency and hypoxic sets into your workouts.
This whole new understanding of breath control is about so much more than just swimming faster. It's really opening up a brand new frontier in human performance, blending physiology with psychology and some seriously cutting-edge tech.
And there's a really fascinating psychological benefit to all of this. When you learn to stay calm and in control when your body is screaming at you to breathe, it has this powerful crossover effect. Athletes who do this kind of training consistently say they feel more mentally resilient and way less anxious during high-pressure races. It's really about training your mind just as much as your body.
And that future is pretty much already here. I mean, what used to require a full-on physiology lab can now be monitored with simple wearable sensors that track your muscle oxygen and CO2 levels. There are even AI-powered apps out there, developed with universities, that can analyze your stroke-to-breath ratio and predict fatigue before you even feel it coming. It's amazing.
So it really leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? For decades, we thought we knew the secret to endurance breathing, and it turns out we were wrong. As science keeps peeling back the layers of how our bodies work, it just makes you wonder, what other fundamental beliefs about performance are just waiting to be completely overturned? You know, all the incredible insights we talked about today were drawn from real amazing university research. If you want to explore more fascinating articles where science and the real world collide, just like this, you should definitely check out academicjobs.com. Thanks so much for diving in with us today.